Hey, and welcome back to another episode of The Tech Lead. Today we are drinking the special drink. It is water. Oh, so good. So good. I wanted to talk about the top programming languages for 2018. Now, I should note that picking a programming language is very important because for me, I had learned a slew of random languages that really didn't help me much. Like, I learned Perl because I naively thought it was a very cool, hot thing, but it turned out very few people were using Perl except like system administrators, and I was stuck in this world of Perl for like a year until I finally got out. And I had also learned PHP, and I was doing a lot of PHP programming, and PHP has long been considered sort of this abomination language that a lot of developers don't really respect much. Now, personally, I think PHP is a fantastic language. Like, you can do so much with it. And yeah, it's kind of unstructured. And if you don't use it correctly, it can lead to very messy code design. But it doesn't matter what you really think. The fact is, many developers these days look down on PHP developers. And during the interview whiteboarding exercises, you start writing PHP. Like, the interviewer may basically just categorize you as like a PHP script kiddie or something like that. So, and then in another scenario, I had learned ActionScript for Flash programming. Flash was very hot for a while, and then Flash died out. So anyway, I thought I would go over what I consider to be the top programming languages of 2018 and talk about each one sort of in depth. Now, to help us, I found this amazing website called Wikipedia, but they have this thing called Programming Languages Used in Most Popular Websites. And I thought this would be pretty useful to go through. We're going to go over these web-based languages first, and then we'll also talk a little bit about other languages for use in other areas like mobile or gaming. And we can see like some of these top companies and websites like Google, Facebook, YouTube, Yahoo, Amazon, Wikipedia, Twitter. And we can see what languages they're using. For the front end side, everyone is using JavaScript. So that's a very popular choice. And then for the backend, that's where things get a little bit interesting. Like Google is using C, C++, Go, Java, Python. Facebook's using Hack, which is basically PHP, some Python, C++, Java, and like Erlang, D, XHP, Haskell. And then YouTube is using C, C++, Python, Java, Go. Yahoo's on PHP, Amazon's on Java, C++, Perl, and then Twitter is on C++, Java, Scala, Ruby. Okay, Microsoft is on C#. And so we can see in table form here, Java is used pretty heavily. And then we have Python and some C++, and we have some PHP as well. Now, so let's just start with PHP here since we already talked about it a bit. And I think it's a really great language if you want to get your own project up and running. But the problem is, yeah, the reputation just isn't very good. And for beginners, I don't really recommend that you get off on this because it's going to start you off on the wrong foot and just kind of cripple you throughout the whole interview processes. Although, I think if you were to like apply to PHP heavy companies, and there's a few of them, and especially startups, then it's pretty good actually. And it's a very easy language to learn. JavaScript is a great language, very easy to use, and everybody should know it probably to some degree. It's used in like React Native as well for doing mobile development, and every company is running JavaScript. I would say the only problem with this JavaScript is that you may get categorized as a front-end developer, and the competition is very high, and it's a rapidly changing field, and so it's not that solid of a base to build a career upon. But it's also a skill that's really pretty good to have. Take off this jacket, it's kind of hot. Next language here, Java. It's a great language too, and the great thing about Java is it can also be used for Android development, so it can get you into that. And if you check the charts, Android has been growing very quickly recently, and I believe that there are a lot of job shortages for Android developers these days. So yeah, I think Java is really a good program to get into, and as soon as you master the basics, you could get into Android development as well. And probably there's some less competition there for the specialty of Android development, and you may be able to find something right there. My only reservation about Java would be that it is the language used by many college courses. So every single computer science student will already know Java. there's a ton of competition for Java, and Java is free. The other thing about Java is it may be more verbose than other languages, and it's just not really fun to write, at least for me. Like, you have to compile the code every time you make a change, and it's just slow to do that. And when you want to run it on a web development server, like, you have to, like, it takes a lot of resources to do that. Like, you gotta boot up Tomcat servers and restart them every time. So it's kind of a heavyweight language. Golang is one of the newer languages invented by Google, and it's really kind of a niche language. Next up is C++. C++ is probably one of the more difficult languages to write in because you have to do a lot of your own memory management, and it's a lower level language in general. But the great thing about it is that it's highly performant, and you'll occasionally see C++ being used like all over the place. Like, you may see it in mobile development, you may see it on the back end where people want to do some complicated algorithmic task. But generally, I think if you're a beginner, I wouldn't really start with C++ unless you know what you're doing, because it's just a more complicated language to get into, and the tasks that it is used for are usually more advanced algorithmic tasks. And for those wondering, C++ is pretty much like C, but C++ just adds on the object-oriented programming portions so that it is just much more object-oriented. C# is basically Microsoft's version of Java, and if you plan to apply to Microsoft, then C# is a good one to use. There's other obscure languages like D and Erlang, which are used in just a few scenarios. Next one is Python. I think Python's a great language. You can see that it's used in many different companies, and it powers a lot of different company backends. A lot of startups are using it. Several years ago, a lot of companies were using PHP to power their web backends, but nowadays, many have switched over to use Python. Python is a clean and simple language to get going with. It's interpreted, which means you don't have to compile it every time. Like, you make a change and you just run it. And so that fast iteration cycle makes it very quick to learn. And it has a lot of the more modern features like object-oriented programming and automatic garbage collection, so you don't have to manage the memory by yourself, which I think is going to be a key thing to look for when you're starting out. Then you can see Ruby on Rails is not really being used by a lot of large companies anymore, although there are some startups that are still using it. I also wanted to talk a bit about mobile development since that's a pretty hot area. So I mentioned that there is Android development, which is done in Java. There's also this newer language, Kotlin. I'm not sure how many companies have adopted Kotlin yet. I think probably not that many. Like, a lot of code bases are probably still written in Java, and companies are pretty slow to like scrap all that Java code and just switch over to Kotlin. The same goes with iOS development. We have Objective-C and Swift. Many companies have massive code bases in Objective-C, and there's no strong business need to switch over to Swift. So what we do see in mobile development is a lot of companies may start trying to run React Native in JavaScript, which has a real business purpose where you could get that cross-platform development and overall speed up performance with over-the-air updates. You may have also seen that Google invented Flutter, which uses a Dart programming language that also lets you do mobile development that's cross-platform. So the two newer mobile development languages, Kotlin and Swift, I think startups may be starting to adopt it. And as far as iOS development goes, I think Objective-C or Swift are great ones to get into as well. I think Swift is the newest language, very modern, and Apple has specifically tried to make it easier for newer people to learn. So I think Swift is a pretty cool language to get into. And the good thing about that is it's pretty similar to Objective-C. Like, it has a lot of the same foundation. So if you become good at Swift, you'll be able to also pick up Objective-C fairly easily. So I would say if you know Objective-C, you might as well stick with it. But if you're just starting out in iOS development, then Swift is a fine one to go with. And, you know, a lot of startups are starting to pick up Swift these days. And you may be able to land a job at these startups more easily because not many people have expertise in Swift yet. However, I just wanted to note that if you check the charts, you'll see that iOS development is starting to flatline, and Android development has been growing quickly. And so the fact that iOS has lately been flatlining in growth makes me a little bit concerned about it, although it's really not going anywhere. Like, this technology is here to stay, so that's fine. But I would also say that since there's a lot more Android users nowadays, a lot of companies are starting to look into these cross-platform technologies, maybe like React Native, and then that's where knowing some JavaScript might also be useful. Game development is an area that I would look into avoiding if you can, because like I know it's fun and everyone wants to do it. And so generally because of that, the reputation is that the game industry doesn't really treat software engineers that well. So the primary platform that a lot of companies are developing on in 2018 is web, iOS, and Android. And those are the three that a lot of people are trying to hit. So to wrap things up, I think Python is a pretty good general language and is good for a lot of backend development. If you want to get into iOS development, I'd go with Swift, and for Android development, Java. And those are basically the three languages that I would go with in 2018. And then on the side, pick up some JavaScript and HTML, CSS just for fun, so you could do some web development, because that's probably just a good skill to have in general. So there you have it. I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Remember to give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Oh, I see you. I see you.